What is ownership? It sounds silly. Like, what is ownership? What does ownership mean? It actually does mean something. It's not as simple as saying, I created it, so I own it. Ownership means who has the creative control over a particular property, idea, even service. That's what ownership means. Ownership comes down to one of my favorite terms, and I talk about it again in um, the guide to intellectual property in 10 shorts, understanding intellectual property in 10 shorts. Got the name of it suddenly. The link is right below or in the chat. Be sure and check it out. That will probably be the most essential episode, aside from the next episode I'm going to share with you, that you should watch. But if you're cramped on time, just get the definitions. One of my favorite terms is points or percentages. Depending on the creative area you're in or your medium, you'll hear either points or percentages. Even in if you dealt with mortgages, if you bought a house, or if you're a mortgage broker or whatever, people will talk about points. If you're involved in the music business, they'll talk about points. If you're involved in the media business, as far as with books, they'll talk about percentages. These all mean essentially either royalties and or ownership. When you create something, again, from your idea, your intellectual property, you create it on your own, you own all the percentages. You own 100%, 100 points, the whole thing. You got it. The whole thing is yours. If and when you partner with other folks, such as a distribution company that will get your stuff out there. In the music world, it might be Empire, which is something, a business that just distributes music for indie artists. They take a smaller cut than a traditional music label like a Def Jam, but they still take their cut and they distribute it through their channels. They might press up some CDs for the 5 of you that are still buying CDs. Shout out to y'all. But they'll do that. But then they won't actually take ownership per se of the work, as far as I know. They just distribute it. So the independent artist still owns 100% of the percentages or the points. They own the whole thing. You might work, again, as I mentioned, like with a Def Jam or with a Sony and one of their labels. Let's say Polygram. You end up working with one of them. They might say, hey, we own this whole thing. Our company owns the whole thing, but you'll get a particular royalty based on this. And so based on those numbers, maybe you have 10 points or 10%. So if the CD, dating myself again, CD sells for $20, then after the wholesale price on all that stuff, the actual profit might be $10. If you have 10 percentage points or own 10% of that profit, that means you get $1 for every CD sold. So it's $20 CD, you get 10% of that, of the actual wholesale price, which is $10. So you get $1. The more independent you can be, the more you own and get of those points or percentages. So the work that I do, for instance, with Career Remix, the book that came out about a year and a half, 2 years ago, shout out to Barnes & Noble. The percentage I get whenever you guys buy a copy of this is relatively small compared to, say, those of y'all that have already pre-ordered this one. They have very different percentage or points because this one is actually through a major publisher called Barnes & Noble. This one is from my own publishing company called Bring Your Worth. The ownership and the percentages owned, or the points owned or gotten, are very different between these two things. I knew that going into it, but I felt like it was a partnership that was worthwhile to work with Barnes & Noble because I worked with them in the past. We had some bestsellers. It makes perfect sense to me. What you need to do is walk into these situations with your eyes open. So know that if you go independent, that percentage that you own could be 100%, as is the case with my stuff. Or if you're going to go into certain partnerships or signing a certain contract, then there's only going to be so much you'll be able to own because obviously there's other people involved. And if you end up signing particularly intense contracts, you might not own anything. And that means they can kind of run with it. I remember having a conversation with someone about the music business ages ago. Had to be 10, 20 years ago. Long time ago, back when I lived in Chicago. And they were talking about a major rock group. I won't even mention their name because I didn't want to spread any rumors. But however they set up the rock group, only one of the members, I think it was the lead singer, if I remember correctly, actually owned the rights to the name and the likeness of that group. So technically, the lead singer, who was the face of the group, could fire everyone involved, and they might have fired everyone involved, which might have been why we were talking about it at this random music party. They could fire everyone involved and then replace the guitarist, the drummer, the xylophonist, whoever was involved, percussionist, everybody. And they still can make albums under that name, but that's because the name was owned and likeness, the intellectual property, the execution of this rock band idea was owned by the lead singer. This is that same idea, except it could apply to a major music label. It could apply to a venture capitalist firm. Shout out to my VCs out there, but this does happen. It could apply to a major publishing company. It could apply to a partner that you end up working with, and you don't realize what contract you're signing, and suddenly they can run with it in directions that you had no intention of, even if the idea originated with you. So be really thoughtful as far as percentages and points, because that also obviously will affect your runway and how much money you'll be getting in royalty into the future. I know there's certain contracts that I signed that I knew I was giving away my intellectual property rights. But the amount of royalties or money that I asked for, I increased it by 50 to 100%. And the company said, yeah. So then that ended up being a great trade-off where I was like, I can make double the money. I can make more intellectual property, which obviously I did, but I can make more intellectual property. I'm willing to give that away, and you guys give me 200% return based on what you're originally saying. Fantastic. We both walked away happy. We still have a good relationship to this day. Cool, not a problem. So know exactly what you're getting into. If and when you want to go deeper, this is the place to start. Beginner's Guide to Contracts and Partnerships. It's super short. It's about a half an hour long, and it's 2 or 3 episodes talking about red flags to contracts, how to build up co-founderships and so forth. Like when you create something together, you're essentially co-founders. All those different things. A lot of these adventures that I've been on, and I'm kind of going in these adventures over the several years, it's been a roller coaster ride. I'm taking all those insights, as many as possible, and trying to share them with you so that you can learn from some of those good decisions and sometimes not so good decisions in the long term that I end up making, and you're able to level up what you're doing. One last recommendation is the book Venture Deals by Brad Feld and Jason Mendelson. I do not have a physical copy, but I have it digital. I got like the first edition many years ago. Fantastic book. Brad Feld is very well known, at least within the VC communities. Very well known VC, very respected. Excellent column or articles he's done for Inc. magazine, even talking about mental health and depression and all those ups and downs that come. Even if you don't have those kinds of issues, those things come with startups and with foundership, because as an entrepreneur, as you might understand, a lot of us are kind of creating our own path. And it's yet to find that mental toughness. He talks about that. He's always been very vulnerable about it. I respect him and I love his work. I think this is his only book. I wish he would do more. Fantastic book though. It's really simple. The subtitle is, I think it's How to Be Smarter Than Your Investor and Your Lawyer, which is cheeky, but he's breaking it down where it's all these complicated things, including percentages and points, including cap tables and investment and Series A and all these different things that even I sometimes struggle with those terms. He's able to break it down and be super coherent with it. They've updated the book like 20 times. I think it's like the 4th or 5th edition. Here's a hint. If a book has a 4th or 5th edition, that means that the publisher sold through the original edition of it, and there's demand for more copies of it and or an updated version. So if he's on his 4th version, Brad and his colleague Jason are killing it. So it's definitely worth checking it out. I'm sure they added a lot more. Again, I have the 1st edition back when I was doing Cuddler, the last startup I did, and that was 7-8 years ago. So they've updated several times. I'm sure it's way more complex in a good way and interesting than it was before. Be sure and check it out. Again, I'm a couple of degrees away from Brad. I know he's doing amazing work. his book actually reflects that. That would be my biggest book recommendation on here. One last caveat. I know you're saying, Damon, I just want to make my music. I just want to make my art. I just want to create stuff. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. There's certain things that I've talked about on the show or haven't talked about this on the show that I love to do that y'all don't know about. I don't make any money from it, what have you. I think what's beautiful though is that if you decide to market or bring that stuff to the rest of the world and actually make a living from it, do a side hustle, some of those things I specialize in, I want to make sure that you have the tools as soon as you go in and before you go in, just in case you decide to go in, that you're ready to run with it. And if you decide not to monetize some of your stuff and not to bring it to the world as a business, cool, don't even worry about it. But just in case, put this episode in your back pocket, as well as the books I recommended. Again, Jeanette and I's own book, particularly for you writers out there, The Passive Writer. We talk a little bit about intellectual property and more, how to get your work out there. Recommend Jenny Blake's book. Shout out to you. This book is about 15 years old. It's still fantastic. Fantastic book. Great definition of what runway means. And finally, Venture Deals by Brad Feld and Jason Mendelson. Fantastic book. Just to get insight into what direction you're trying to go in. And eventually, if you want to monetize your work. I think that's everything. We'll probably have a new episode on Sunday, but I'm having some technical difficulties. So just like last week, it's just one of those times. Be sure and keep people lookout. And I definitely will be live on Monday. Ooh, I'm setting up a good Monday episode for y'all. I'm excited. If you don't want to miss anything, come to you every Wednesday and Sunday at 1:11 p.m. Standard Time, Vegas time. And you can subscribe. Hit the notification with the little tiny bell icon so you don't miss a beat. Last week of the live presentations all through September. We're going into the last week of September as of this recording. It's the home stretch. I got some good stuff coming for y'all. I'm excited, as you can probably tell. So I can barely stay still. Until Monday and perhaps on Sunday, I'll see you guys soon. Remember, you can always bring your worth.